Good evening. Welcome to Connect DC's Juneteenth Dark Moon. I'm Katrina Messenger, the founder of Connect DC. Connect DC is a Wiccan-based public ritual group that seeks to heal and transform the city of Washington, D.C. through magic, mystery, and celebration. Last year, we celebrated our 20th year, and we invite you to join us as we stop, drop, and do ritual in new venues and in new ways. As a pagan ritual group, Connect DC builds relationships within our community and with the earth itself. And in order to further our right relationship with the land and the people who have tended and held it sacred from time immemorial, we acknowledge that we normally hold our rituals on the ancestral lands of the Nakachunk, the Pamunkey, the Piscataway, the Powhatan, Saponi, Seneca, Tutelo, and other peoples whose names we may not know yet, and we are committed to learning those names. We pay respect to their elders past and present, and honor their truths. And so here we are on June 19th, and here we are in Connect DC, honoring the dark moon, the new moon, whichever way you want to call it. But we're honoring the times of the darkness, the times between the crescents, where we have time and space to revel in the darkness of the unknowing, of the mystery, of the hidden, of the dark. And this is a time where we have spent a great deal of our time really dealing with the difficult times in all of our lives. And so I want to spend a little time tonight speaking with, for, and pleading with our ancestors. During times of great turmoil, the ancestors come forward instead of simply waiting for us to call. They are here by the thousands, no, the tens of thousands, and not just by blood and spirit. While the whole world stands in terror, the ancestors of the plant beings, the tree beings, all our animal brethren, the ancestors of our lands, waterways, clouds, even the earliest forms of Gaia, reach out to hold and guide us. And you could say to yourself, this is a time of ancestors. And so it is important that we recognize just how important how we spend our time in their presence and within our work. We have such a broad array of ancestors to call upon. Ancestors who have shown us how to deal with things that seem like it's just too big for any one of us to look at. We have ancestors who have been able to show us just by their examples that there are ways to get through almost any crisis, whether that crisis is the enslavement of a people, is the stealing and massacre of people on their lands and their crops, their villages, and their institutions, whether that crisis is the land that you're on being lost in a war and suddenly you're seen to be unwanted on the very land that you have cared for generation upon generation, or whether it's a long, far away ruler who believes that you and your people are subjugated no matter what and have no right to stand for freedom. We have ancestors who have faced hunger and enslavement and famine and glaciers and disease and all kinds of natural and human-made disasters. We have ancestors who have faced up to governments, have faced down police, have faced down bayonets, have faced down all types of armies, whether they are armies of police, National Guard, or the US Army. We have ancestors who have not only walked their way to freedom, but turned around and went back and saved even more, who saved several hundred in a single night. We have ancestors who have rioted in the streets. We have ancestors who has stopped people from eating certain foods so we could boycott it across the nation. We have ancestors who have figured out how to feed people when there was no food, give people warmth when there was no warmth, give people a chance for health, to feed children breakfast. We have ancestors who have done so much that sometimes we don't actually appreciate what they have to teach us and tell us about where we are right now. It's important that when we look to the ancestors, that we recognize that they, like us, were just, for the most part, everyday people doing extraordinary things. They were everyday people who said, this is my work. This is my step forward. Who said, somebody ought to do this, and I am somebody, so I'm going to do it. And so we got to get clear that their example is not an example of someone who already knew how to do everything. They're an example of people who learned, who stepped forward, who took chances. Let me explain to you one of the things that we need to learn from our collective ancestors. And one of the first lessons is survival. It seems almost silly to note that we're getting bored by staying home, or we long for haircuts and loud parties, and we beg for our children to go to school or somewhere other than we are. Meanwhile, in Africa, Ebola has returned. There are large oil spills and environmental damage occurring all over the world. Earthquakes, hurricane, and war rages on. And we're worried about boredom. Think about that. And here in the US, Black Lives Matter, at least for now, while everywhere Confederate monuments, flags, and portraits are being removed, and still, as the conversation deepens around issues of public safety, Black, brown, and Native people are still the prey of so-called law enforcement. While the laws they are enforcing have long been off the books. The Black codes, for example, excused the killing of Blacks who were found off their plantation and not in custody of a white person. The law is gone, but the extrajudicial killings persist. Some people, and usually white people, confess to me their hopelessness, their despair, and their rage fatigue. And they ask me questions: how do Black people not lose their minds to all this horror? How do we survive year after year, decade after decade, generation after generation, facing the enormity of what now white America is learning to open their eyes to? And what I point out to them, we survive because that is the ultimate victory. Number one. As Dorothy Dash said in Daughters of the Dust, we are the descendants of those who chose to survive. But also, we did something with all that rage and with all that grief. You know, that incredible Black culture that everybody celebrates and loves, you know, our music, our literature, our dance, our scholarship, our stories, all that culture was us channeling all that rage and grief. That's how we survived. We applied ourselves to the process of making something beautiful out of all that we had to endure. And it's still happening, and it will continue to happen. But at some point, even that's not enough. And every generation has had their explosion of African Americans demanding to be free, to be able to pursue our own level of excellence, to be able to find our own ways to our own uh, pinnacles of success. And so, what we need for our white allies and, quite frankly, our co conspirators is an understanding that there is much to be done with that rage and that sorrow, that sadness and that anger. There is work to be done, serious work. We're not just standing in the streets yelling, and if that's all you see and that's all you think that's happening, then you don't understand Black culture. At the exact same time that we're in the streets yelling, we have poets making poetry. We have songwriters writing songs. We have artists creating beauty. We also have academics creating scholarship. We have legislators and lawmakers creating policy. We are taking all of that and we are putting it to work. So, what is needed in this time where it's not just us this time, right? It's not just African Americans. It's not just Latinx Americans. It's not just Native Americans who are finally seeing what this country has been, what this country's sin is, what is in the core of this country's heart. There is work that is needed. Now, we used to say in the old days, in the movements I was in, that you always study and praxis. You do study, you take action. You summarize what happens on the action and you study it. You figure out new ways to take action and you take action. But here's what's not so clear. We celebrate Dr. King marching. We celebrate Dr. King at the pulpit. But what we forget is Dr. King reading and writing, Dr. King studying and making long-term plans, Dr. King having strategic meetings to figure out how are we going to move these things and get all these things together on the chessboard of a strategic change. This is what needs to be studied and understood. It's not just about standing in the street and hollering. And that has never been our sole solution. And so for all of those who are tired of yelling and are tired of weeping, okay, there's still work for you to do. There's plenty of groups offering curriculum for those who need to study, right? And there's plenty of groups out here doing action, and it's not just in demonstrations and protests. Yeah, we need you there too, but we need you also writing letters, holding companies and communities and institutions, holding them accountable. There is action at multiple levels. The Black Panthers didn't just stand around with afros and combs and guns. They fed children. We need to remember that there are multiple ways to step up to this moment. Study and action. And not all of the action is in the streets. So let us get clear. Those are at least the beginnings. But where do we go from there? Well, we need to talk about culture change, social change, language change, myth repair, tearing up old scripts and stereotypes. We need new rituals. New rituals. You know, one of the things that is not really clear from the killing of Floyd was to understand what ritual was being enacted on the day of his murder. George Floyd was not just a random event. There were two rookies there. Do we understand that having the two rookies there while this one old-time cop kills a Black man? What was the ritual that was being enacted? It was to make them collude in murder so they could always be held, have something over their head. so they can always be called back into line. We need new rituals. We need rituals where new cops are not taken out and immediately dipped into the darkness of the soul of the police union. We need things where people who are working for the people come out and meet the people, and it is a new ritual. This is who you work for. Present yourself to them. Make a vow to this community. We need new rituals. They used to take young white men, and for their first night, right, they'd go out and buy them a prostitute and let them go through the, quote, dark side of town to have a little fun. We need new rituals. We need new ways. We now know, as if we weren't aware of it before, that lynchings were public events people came to, got their photograph taken. Photographs from the lynchings were sold as wares door to door. We need new rituals. We need new ways. We need new rituals in the social life of this country. Because every person who's above a certain age in Congress were raised with those rituals. Do you understand what I'm saying? We need a new way to do this, and we need to call things what they are. There are so many ways this country and its social institutions actually enact rituals to teach white people how to act. We need new rituals. We need new ways. Why is it that every once in a while you hear of the police academy where they have to throw out the entire graduating class? Because they go too far in their rituals. They're hazing. We need new rituals. Rituals that said that those whose work is for the community must be then presented to the community, whereupon their vows are taken. That's what the indigenous people do with their warriors. They present them to the community. These are the people for which you work. Don't ever forget it. These are the people who, by their authority, you do the work. We need new roles of embodiment. How do we embody in the world that we live what we want the world to be? How do we embody it? How do we teach our children to embody it? Those children who are in the streets raising hell, they were raised by parents who told those children, you can be anything you want to be. You have the power to change this world. Be proud of yourself. And then we are so afraid for them now because they're out because they believed us. We need to embody the change we want to see in the world. We need to trust our children. We need to trust our old folks too, but we need to trust our children. And that's so important. So important. So what I've gone over is that we need to study, we need to take action, we need better rituals, and we need to embody the change. We need to be open to new voices, new opportunities. People are so afraid. I hear it everywhere. Defund the police. Oh my goodness. Oh my God, the police are not a holy institution. Are these the people you want your children to have to face when you're not there? Do you want for every Black child that is born in this world, in the US at least, has to be given the talk? We've got to make a change. It has to be changed. The police is not a sacred institution. It comes from the people who used to catch runaway slaves, who used to beat up union workers. They come from the same group of people who used to like massacre Native people in dark of night as they slept. The police, some places, were just gangs that were big enough that gave them all uniforms and called them a police department. We need to get rid of that. And as magical people, can we understand the egregore associated with most police departments in this country? Oh, yeah, we need to start again in conversation with each community. What do you want? What do you need? What are people calling for help for? We need a whole new way. We need new things. And so we're going to have to get outside of our comfort zone and really call into question. Why is it every generation of African American has to come back and fight the same battles over police violence? Think about it. Nothing has changed. You know what the definition of insanity is, right? Keep trying the same things. It's not a training issue, people. You can keep changing the person at the top. You can't grow a straight tree from a crooked root. You need to come back to that. So what do we need? What do we need to understand about what is happening here in this country and around the world right now in the dark moon? Some will say, Katrina, you're talking politics. Yeah, that means you don't understand what politics is. Politics is simply how we as humans get along with each other, right? We can be born under the same roof, but as soon as you walk out that door, you are in a political world because we have to actually have an interaction. And there's power differences, age differences, privilege differences. And so we need to be aware of that. And politics is how we solve those differences. And we as pagans, as witches, as mystics, as mages, as shaman, as oracles, as heathens, as a satru, as whatever the hell you call yourself, we have to live in this world. We don't live in some shallow cave up in the mountains. We live in this world. And we have to deal with this world. And that's what our ancestors are teaching us. We got to deal with what is happening in this world. And so the process of transformation, right? How do we transform what it is that is happening into something new, into something better, into something that in fact takes into account not only our humanity, but ourselves as children of this earth? So that we're not only in right relationship with each other, Fannie Lou, but we are in right relationship with everyone else who is a child of this earth. How do we get to that transformation? How do we bring it to the forefront? There are a lot of different strategies people talk about, but we as magic workers, we who are the practitioners of the hidden crafts, we are the ones who should be taking some steps forward to say, I know how to do that. I know how to do magic. I know how to put forward into the world that which is transformation. Somebody wrote on the thing, on the comments, something about a rite of passage. And that's what we need. We need a rite of passage for our species. We need a rite of passage for this country. We need a rite of passage for this world. We need to transform from the children who didn't know that they were not the only things in the world to the adults that recognizes that we share this world with so many others. We need a rite of passage to move from adolescence and teenage years into our adult selves, to come to grip with what is required of us as an adult collaborator with all the rest of nature. Because right now we're acting out in pretty specific ways. We are cruel, utterly cruel to each other. We have enough food on this planet to feed everybody. So why are there people hungry? Why? Really? Think about that. Why? Why are they throwing food away while at the same time we're reaching all over the place to get food to feed people who can't get access to food. Think about it. There's something wrong with the system. There's something wrong with how things are put together. And this is something we especially should have some ideas about. One of them is, how do we create a spell that continues to renew itself with each generation? How do we get ourselves back in alignment with the core principles of nature? How do we rejoin the rest of our animal brethren in appreciating how to be sustainable, how to leave enough for the next season, the next crop, the next generation? How do we do that? It's like we need to come to grips with what is necessary to renew our links to the other children of Earth. We need a renewal. We need to get ourselves, our culture, our bodies, and our souls back in alignment. We need to produce a culture that celebrates the generative. We need to have a culture that helps people learn how to give back, how to stand with, how to stand against. We need to get a culture that teaches us that no one should go hungry in a time of plenty. And no one should consume more of the world's resources than what we contribute. Yeah? Yeah. We need a renewal. And that's exactly what our ancestors can teach us. How to be in right relationship. How to treat each other as the special jewels that we could be if we are given a chance to contribute, to learn. So many people ask me, what should I, what should we, what should they, what should anybody be doing right now? And we've been showing the faces of some of the people who were just everyday people, and some of the people who were just everyday people who catapult themselves into positions of leadership and visibility. And what I tell them is two things: to look at your own hands. Ask yourself, what is the work that is in my hands? What is the work that calls to me deep in my soul? And what is it in my hands? That's number one. And then the next thing I say, what is the world you wish to create? And whatever that world is, figure out what you can do now to plant the seed for its growth. Plant the seeds for the future. Do the work that's in your hands. This is how you survive. This is how you survive rage fatigue, grief fatigue. This is how you get past despair. This is how you take that rage and that grief and point it towards something bigger than you. Do the work that is yours. Sing the work that is yours. Dance the work that is yours. Bake the work that is yours. Needlepoint. Put your hands in the soil. Lift things up to the air. Whatever it is. Study, take action, ritual, and embodiment. Those are my lessons. That is my message. And here on Juneteenth, the holiday we celebrate in the African American community to honor when the last slaves were released in Texas. Recognize that many of us still live lives of slaves. Liberate yourself. Transform yourself. Renew the world. Renew the soil. renew your life. The future is now. Thank you and good night.